Hi everybody. Today I thought I would just go over some information about the lathe. I get a lot of comments that I thought I'd kind of go over and clear some of that stuff up and just let you guys watch the video of it working and me explaining a few things about it. So one of the things I get, this is a rough cut of the first blade. And one of the comments that I get a lot is that the blade doesn't touch, like the saw blades don't touch every part of the propeller blade, and that there are flat spots left. And that's a comment I actually get a lot. And a lot of you already know this, but for those of you that don't know, I do a rough cut first. So the first thing is each blade, so this blade will get a rough cut, and then I'll stop and I'll turn it over, and the second blade will get a rough cut. And after that rough cut that gets the bulk of the material off, then I'll go back and I will set the pitch of the prop. Then after I get the pitch the way that I want it, then I'll go back and I'll do a final cleanup cut that will catch all those flat spots, except for a little bit at the base. So right there at the hub, that actually stays a little bit flat, and that's something that I blend in. But if I were to let the saw blade cut deep right there at the hub, then I would kind of have a stair step there from the blade to the hub. And I can't have that. That, has to be blended out. And if I got that too far close to the hub, then when I blended it out, it would actually put like an angle or a taper in my bolt pattern. And if it did that, that would be really bad because my bolt pattern area has to stay completely flat. So that is one of the things that I get a lot of comments on, and I thought that I would just kind of clear that up. So this is a rough cut. I will go back and do a cleanup final cut, but even on my final cut, I will still have some flat spots next to the hub, and I need those for later on in the process. The second thing I get asked about a lot is how do I determine the pitch and the diameter? And that one's a little bit more tricky, but basically, first of all, the pitch is in inches. So when I talk about diameter and pitch, I'm talking about inches of pitch. And what that means is that for every single rotation of this propeller, this particular prop gets a 55-inch pitch. For every single rotation of this propeller, it will go 55 inches forward, assuming 100% efficiency. So we know we're not going to get that, but roughly it's going to pull the airplane 55 inches forward with every single rotation of this prop. So to get that number, I take the customer's cruising RPM and cruising mile per hour, and I put that into my prop pitch calculator that you can actually find on our website, and you can play with that prop pitch calculator also. It's up there for anybody to use, and it's really helpful information. But I take those two numbers and it spits me out a pitch. Now, I also will do that for the max numbers to make sure I get the same pitch. And once I get the same pitch for those two set of numbers, then I know I have the correct pitch for that application. So the next part is the diameter. And when deciding diameter, I generally have two limiting factors. Number one is what the airplane can take. So some airplanes have clearance issues, ground clearance issues, or in pusher configurations, there may be some struts or some wires or things like that that will require a certain diameter propeller, so I don't catch any of those. So when I do, that's probably the first question I ask, how much diameter do I have to work with? Then the second thing that I look at is my tip speed. So I take the engine RPM at max RPM, and I'll see how big of a diameter I can swing before I start reaching inefficiency in my tip speed. So about 800 is kind of the upper end of max. 850, you start getting a little bit like 850 feet per second on your tip, and you'll start getting some noise, and you're getting close to inefficient. And about 900 feet per second for your tip speed, you're going to become inefficient. So I try to stay around 800. If I push it, 850 just on takeoff. Those are the numbers that I go with. So that will give me a diameter that this propeller can swing to stay in all those parameters. And that's how I'll pick the diameter of the prop. And because that my market that I cater to is custom propellers, these are generally not part number propellers that they could go and order other places. That's, part of what I do is they tell me, well, I have trees at the end of my runway, so I'd really like to have a good climbing prop. And so after I do all those calculations that we just talked about, I will say, okay, well then I'm going to drop your pitch 1 or 2 inches lower to make sure that we really turn up and you have more of a climb prop. And so that's one of the things that I do to make sure that my props are exactly what each of my customers need. So that's another question I could ask. So I will move on to another question. A lot of people ask how long it takes to cut each blade. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes per blade per side. So this blade will take this one was about 35 minutes because it's a 90-inch prop, which is one of the longest ones that I do. Then I'll turn it around. It'll take another 35 minutes to do the other side. And then I'll come back and do the final cut. So it can take, 3-4 hours is what it would take. Like I said, it depends on how long the blade is and how quickly I get the pitch set. But I don't have to be watching it while it cuts. I am always there to turn it on, and I have to be there to turn it off. But while it's cutting, the lathe does not require any attention from me, so I can be sanding or cleaning or multitasking as long as I'm able to keep an eye on it and I'm there to shut it off. So one of the other questions that I get is, who built this lathe, or where did the lathe come from? I also get a lot of people telling me it's not a lathe, but I call it a lathe. I call it a tracing lathe. That's what Grandpa called it. But Mr. Culver, the original owner and founder of the company, had this machine and he built it. And then over the years, we're about the 4th owner of this company. And over the years, every owner who's had it has made some improvements and changes to the machine. And then when we got it, Grandpa went over it and improved it significantly. So they used to run it through, like after a prop came out of this lathe, it went through several other machines before it got to the hand sanding process. And Grandpa eliminated all of that. So as soon as it comes out of the lathe, I'm able to take the orbital sander and just start sanding because it cuts so nicely and precisely to the pattern on top. So that's an improvement that Grandpa made. He also made an adjustment on it so that I can make a left-handed prop off of a right-handed pattern, which has come in really handy. I actually have one this week that I have to make like that. I only have left-handed designs and I need a right-handed design. And so I'll just take one of those and I just flip a switch and put the chain from the top of the pulley to the bottom of the sprocket. I put it on the bottom of the sprocket and then it'll reverse cut. So that's something that was super beneficial for us as we make new patterns and expand how many patterns we have. We have about 300 right now, and you would think that that's enough, but we still just keep running into applications that need something special and unique that we don't have, and that's the lathe has allowed us to make a lot of new patterns relatively easy. So that's the story on the lathe. And I think when I talked to Mr. Culver's son, I think they called the lathe Otto, is what he told me. So they had named the lathe Otto. So I thought that was a cool piece of history. There's actually a lot of pieces in our shop that are original from Mr. Culver himself. I got a few pictures and photo albums of Mr. Culver in the original prop shop. And a lot of the pieces that we have from the old company are original. So my sanding stand is one of them. And I love that we have that little piece of history with it. So another one of the questions I get is, where did you get all the patterns? Where did the patterns come from? Well, we have patterns. It's kind of like the lathe. We have patterns from all the previous owners, and we have, like I said, about 300, but we also make some. And I do have some older YouTube videos of how I make new patterns. I generally make a copy of a pattern that we have, and then I add Bondo and shape it to what its needs are, and then I'll make a hard copy off of my Bondo copy, and then that gets added to the library of patterns. I can also copy propeller blades, they're already made. I don't generally do that unless it's a period specific, like historic value propeller, something like for a museum, like for Old Rhinebeck, where they have an original World War I prop or a classic propeller that it's very important for the profile, for the sake of history, to keep that exact prop on there. Then I'll duplicate it, but I don't duplicate any other manufacturer's propeller, even if they're not in business anymore. Partially because I feel like that's kind of stealing, and second of all, I feel like my patterns are really good. We have really, really good patterns that perform really well, and I'm partial to my own patterns, so I generally will not copy any other propeller unless it's for the sake of preserving history. And as you can see, we are about done with this prop. I hope that answered some of the questions maybe you guys had. And if you guys have any more questions, you can put them in the comments and I'll try to answer them there, or maybe do another video like this where I can answer them and help spread a little propeller knowledge. And so just leave it in the comments and I will get you guys some answers. Thanks for watching this video, and you guys have a good day.